Hello my lovelies, today we're looking at paper 1 question 3, and all the purpose of this video is just to talk you through how I would read and annotate a text. This text is taken from Cambridge. I've explained a little bit about it on the blog. It's not the kind of thing that we would get on AQA. I don't even know, for instance, if it's fiction. That said, it does work really nicely for structure, and I've used it before for example question 3s that are not based on AQA stuff. And also it's information that's in the public domain, so it was something that I could access readily and you can use. At the top here I've got some of the things that I might be looking for. The approach I'm going to take is much more easier than that. The approach is really what ideas, what themes, what characters do I get at the beginning, what viewpoints, and how do they develop. That's all I'm looking for really. Ideas, characters, themes, and how do they develop. So I'm really not going to learn that list, have that list in mind, but they're kind of some of the things that I might find if I went through and looked for them. But that's not the approach I'm going to take. It's going to be much more simple than that. This, for AQA, the introduction box is more useful than it is on Cambridge, in that it's going to tell you if it's coming from the beginning of a text or the middle of a text, and that will give you some things that you might expect. So for instance, if it's the introduction at the beginning of a story, I'm going to find lots of questions raised. I'm going to maybe find a bit of description, some details, some information about the character that I'm going to need to know at the beginning to understand things later. And the main thing I'm looking for is just why this? Why this idea? Why do I need this information here? And why do I need it now? What does it help me understand that's going to come afterwards? So the writer starts with, the crowd swarmed into the building, many eager to hear plans that might bring prosperity to their town. Others wore grim expressions, aware of the titanic fight needed to save a precious site. So the idea that I've got, the thing that I've got is a crowd. And so at the beginning, the writer's establishing the idea of the crowd. So I'm thinking, why this here? I'm thinking, if they're thinking about the reaction of the crowd, that's going to be important. So I'm going to be looking to track that idea through, which is why I've underlined in the crowd. And their reaction at the beginning, their feelings at the beginning are eager, and others have got the grim expression, so they don't feel the same. And we've also got the introduction of Anuja, the central character. So I'm already from this first paragraph focused on the crowd and on Anuja, and also on the main speaker. Those are the three characters that are introduced there. And all I'm thinking about as I'm going through is what's going to happen to those things, how are they going to change. We've also, you can see there are other things that are interesting that I might want to take up on, like the many roughly dressed and weather-beaten, compared to the representative from the development country. So we've already got this us versus them idea that I might want to explore. So I'm just going to have that in my head, because it's a while since I read this, as I track these ideas through. So all I'm doing is picking up what ideas do I have at the beginning and how are they going to develop all the way through, and that's all I'm doing. That's the wrong way. Okay, so you know why we're here tonight. The leading member of the community began. Food Freight want to build a depot on our common land next to the river. Mr. Carmichael is here to tell us why we should let them. So we've got some information here that helps us understand. As I'm thinking, why this here now? Well, the crowd know why they're there, but we don't. So this little bit here, I'm thinking helps me understand what it is that the crowd are doing there. So this information is not for the crowd, it's for us. Which helps us understand that we've got this situation with Food Freight and the depot and the common land. So I've got nothing there about the reactions or the crowd or Anuja or the main speaker, but what I do have is some information there that helps me understand what the crowd are all doing there. Right, and then I've got the temperature in the room rose as the meeting wore on. Now, I'm an English teacher. I see symbolism in everything. I'm thinking that's kind of important, the idea of the temperature rising. I think it's going to reflect maybe the the atmosphere in the room, the tension in the room as well. So I'm interested in that. Hands were swept across sweaty brows and some removed outer garments, because of course it's a physical heat, I think, as well as metaphorical heat. A short break was announced, during which people could look at the glossy plans and maps pinned up around the hall and enjoy cool drinks. Now, I think these things are quite interesting. Why has the writer told us this idea of the glossy plans, the cool drinks? And I'm thinking of those people who are eager, and those people, the Titanic battle that we had mentioned at the beginning. I'm thinking more of those people are going to be on the eager side to hear the plans, rather than the side of conflicts, the people who had the grim expressions. And I can see also their growing interest. And it seems like the only person who really understands or who remains grim is perhaps Anuja. So she says to the journalist, the company is just trying to bribe our people, not with a few drinks, but with the promise of a medical centre. So why does she tell us that here? I think this idea is going to be something that's going to be developed. Yes, added a man at her side. I spoke to Dr. Misha yesterday when she was here on her weekly visit. She said what we really need is a proper hospital. You can see people are going to be swayed by this, the depot, and what the depot is offering. So I'm beginning to see, if I'm thinking of a spectrum, with the people who were eager at the beginning and the people who, on one side, and the people who had the grim expressions and the aware of the Titanic battle on the other side, then Anuja is definitely on the Titanic battle side versus the people who are eager. And you can see this man who was a companion of Anuja, he's swaying now and going on to the side of the eager. You can see why that hospital would be why it's interesting for us to know that, to understand why people are going to be moving along the spectrum from the Titanic battle side to the eager side. The meeting resumed. Rufus Carmichael rose to speak. As you all know, the area bordering the river is an eyesore. Well, that's going to move me from Titanic battle to the other side of being eager. What use is it to anyone? So he's telling us this information is important to understand why people might be shifting from the battle side to the eager side. Tall trees cast heavy shade. Again, I'm getting all of these things from him. Noxious weeds choke the ground. Again, if I were in the crowd, I would be starting to feel also more eager that they get on with building the depot. Indeed, it's an impenetrable thicket, a haven for vermin. You know, we don't like rats. A lair for undesirables. Nobody wants undesirables, do they? And noisy rooks, how very dare they, have taken over the canopy with their raucous, unending cries. We'll sweep this away. Your town will be a pleasanter place. So if I were on the fence, I'm starting to think, oh, this sounds interesting. But Anuja doesn't. She clenched her fist and muttered. Those are ancient oaks. The rook's nests are used by the red-footed falcons, beautiful and rare birds. She shook her head in disbelief. So we've got this contrast. Look how we've got a paragraph here about Rufus Carmichael and how much he says. Look at how much he says and all of those reasons. And he's talking to the whole crowd. His voice boomed. Whereas Anuja, I think she's just speaking maybe to herself and grumpy at the back, like maybe I would be. So, and you can see also, we've actually got, she says much less, but her reasons are just as valid. Rufus was still talking. Can you see how he's switching? The writer here is switching from Rufus Carmichael to Anuja to Rufus Carmichael and back again. And you can track that. You can see what the writer's doing there at the beginning of each of those paragraphs there. Rufus was still talking. Warehouses will be built, the new harbour. So, I mean, we've already got the idea of jobs. The new harbour that we will build downstream will create a magnet for your local produce. The market will overflow with food and become a symbol for your newfound prosperity. How would I not be eager if I were in the crowd at this point? Anuja thought of the reliable supply of meat from the deer that fed on the acorns in the woodland, a bonus for local hunters. There could be many jobs for all of you. There could be jobs, sorry, for all of you, for many of you. And we've developed the land. We will build a medical centre for you. So I on that spectrum of my views at the beginning, if I were in the crowd, I would be moving very much towards the eager. People squirmed in their seats, turning to neighbours to exchange excited comments. Now, we don't have a crowd that's divided anymore. This is a crowd that's now on one side. So if I'm tracking that idea of eagerness through, and that balance that we had at the beginning, now we don't have a balance any longer, and Anuja is very much isolated, the only person who feels this is worth the Titanic battle. So she seems to be the only person that's still on that side. Sir, she began, and my people, our ancestors began this settlement on that piece of land. They planted those majestic trees hundreds of years ago. She strode to the front to address the people directly. Remember the stories your parents have told you. If those trees die, our settlement will fall into decline. Yes, we've neglected it, but with the neglect has come increases in wildlife, even rare species of dragonflies and field mice. We can carefully clear up the mess of weeds so it remains a home to the lovely creatures. We could resurrect the sacred rituals that used to take place here every year. As Anuja expanded on the virtues of the site, ragged cheers went up. Okay, so we've got a turning point here. Okay, if it was Anuja versus all of the people in the settlement, it was definitely Anuja on her own. But now they're starting to shift back along that spectrum. So we've got a turning point here. First from us sitting near her, so it's a growing turning point. The sound strengthened, and I think that's important. It's very much a growing. The sound strengthened as people became conscious of its many benefits. This was a special place. This is a turning point. This paragraph here stands to me as like a pivot now. It's really changed. The atmosphere has really changed. Rufus's face turned. Now, can you see how he's the isolated one now on the other side? Rufus's face tightened into a grimace. His lips had compressed into a thin line of anger. Okay, so why am I getting this detail here? Why is the writer finding it necessary to tell us this bit? And I have to think that it's to show how how things have changed, that he's shifted from being confident to now being angry. And we can see that change through this description here that the writer's using. So I'm thinking, why this here now? And it's really to show us Rufus is changing emotions, that he's changed from this confident showman, this slick sales talk, to now being angry at Anuja's interruption. And all of this detail just helps support that idea. Gentlemen and ladies, just listen to sense, he began. Jeers and boos broke out, so the crowd have really changed. We've got a real turning point. A dark cloud passed across his face, and suddenly he was panting as though he'd run a race. His good humour was gone. My company is stronger than all of you, he shouted. We will get our way. Not long after this, the meeting broke up in some disarray. As Anuja, so that contrasts as well with the organisation at the beginning. Anuja and her friends left. A blue-grey falcon jetted across the skies. I think this is really symbolic. I think this is really interesting. The red of its undertail and its legs clearly visible. It swooped on a large insect. Now this is really interesting as well. And then veered away before heading for some treetops visible above the houses. Fat drops of rain began to fall. Then lightning sizzled across the sky, a portent perhaps. And I think you can see by the ending why I like this piece to look at in terms of structure. Now this is the language bit. The blue-grey falcon is a symbol, and that's language, it's not structure. But at the end, what are we left with at the end? We're left with the image of a bigger bird swooping on an insect, but whether it catches it or not, we don't know. And the writer finishes with this, as if we didn't know that this was some kind of omen, there's some kind of like foreshadowing of something that's yet to come that we don't know about. We're left hanging on this idea of a portent and a foreshadowing. And I think those are the things that I would want to talk about in my answer. So as I'm looking at this passage as a whole, I can see how we start with this divided crowd who go first to one side and then to the other. And the person who's pivotal for that change is Anuja. We also could track through and talk about Rufus's changing emotions and how they shift from this confident salesman at the beginning through to a man who, well, we don't even know what happens to him at the end.